I'd like to introduce you to one of the chief scientists on the international team who continues his investigation into the World Trade Center dust, Dr. Stephen E. Jones, Emeritus Professor of Physics. Dr. Jones has published over 50 peer-reviewed scientific papers in established journals, including Scientific American and Nature. His PhD research was conducted at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. Dr. Stephen Jones.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Richard. These are photographs through a microscope of these amazing red-gray chips that we found in the World Trade Center dust. We all saw that dust, this voluminous dust. Well, in the dust there are large numbers of these chips that looked like this red material. Early on I thought that this might be paint chips, so I'll talk about that in a moment. We looked and analyzed very carefully 4 independently collected samples. The chain of custody is very well established, as described in our paper. In addition to what is in our peer-reviewed paper on the chain of custody question, we also have videotapes of the persons collecting this, testifying how they collected it, where they collected it, when they collected it, and how it came to the scientists on our team, not just to me, but to other scientists as well. These chips are seen in all 4 of these samples, and you see the pictures here from our paper. We did a consistency check, of course, and analyzed the elements present. It's actually a fairly simple structure in this red material, but a very important structure as you look at the chemical signature, which involves iron and oxygen, as well as aluminum and carbon. And notice there, well, I don't know if there's no zinc in evidence. That becomes important in a moment. But this question, perhaps there's a prosaic explanation for these chips. Perhaps it is just paint, and in particular primer paint, which was applied to the World Trade Center steel, which has a red-orange color, similar to the color that we see here. So we finally found a sample of the primer paint. Now, as most of you know, over 99% of the steel in the World Trade Center buildings was quickly shipped to Asia and melted. It was recycled. This evidence from a crime scene was destroyed. Over the objection of many scientists and engineers, now, nevertheless, some of the steel has been preserved in memorials. This particular memorial is at Clarkson University in New York State. The fellow that put the monument together for the university was kind enough to go to the monument and extract some of the paint off the surface. So this is actual primer paint then from the World Trade Center. And what we have is the analysis of the paint on the bottom plot, and for comparison, the analysis, the chemical, the elemental signature for the red chip material on the top plot. And you can see that they are distinctly different. The paint shows a very strong signal of zinc. There is no zinc in the red chip material. There are other differences that you can see. The calcium peak is enormous in the paint, for example. Now, when we look at the red material, this anomalous, now I can call it anomalous because it doesn't behave like paint, certainly very distinct from the primer paint actually used in the World Trade Center. So now we use a scanning electron microscope to get this remarkable image that appears in our paper, showing faceted grains of iron oxide and aluminum in the plates. If you look towards the center of this picture, you can see both plates and these faceted grains. And the gray material, it looks gray actually on this image from the electron microscope, is an organic. And you know, I have people say, well, maybe the building's collapsed and then somehow you just form this nanothermite material. Well, It turns out to be quite a bit more complicated than that because of the very ultra fine. This is at 50,000 power. We can finally see the plate-like structures containing aluminum and the faceted grains that are also very tiny, about 100 nanometers across. This is nanoscale. It's just hard to comprehend how difficult it is to reach that scale. And notice the uniformity, if you can see then, in the faceted iron oxide grains. Anyway, then you've got the organic mix, and my reaction as soon as someone says, well, maybe the buildings just fell, and you've got iron oxide, which is rust, I agree, and aluminum in the buildings, and they come together and form nanothermite. My question is, yeah, well, where does all the organic material come from, and how do you get these all formed intimately combined in this mixture, and to get it to react rapidly as it does. In this plot, which is described in more detail in our paper, the blue curve shows the reaction of the red material from the World Trade Center. We did this with from all 4 samples. This is one of the samples. Notice that it goes to a high peak there in watts per gram. The red peak is from known nanothermite. This is from a paper published by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. This is a 2001 paper, meaning that they had worked on this, of course, for years prior to this. Both of these curves show a very high energy release in short times. And in fact, the red material from the World Trade Center, 7 years later, when we did the test, reacts more rapidly than known nanothermite. It's a very remarkable stuff. In the words of my colleague, Dr. Fair, it blows up. And this is from the World Trade Center dust, still blows up. Following the tests, these ignition tests in the DSC, we looked at the residue and we observed numerous iron-rich spheres, which Richard talked about, so prevalent in the dust. Now, these spheres were not present in the red material prior to ignition, but following ignition, they are present. This means, it doesn't just suggest, it means that there were very high temperatures present. And furthermore, we find iron oxide beforehand. I'll show you data on that in a moment. And we find elemental iron, that is, not enough oxygen to produce iron oxide after ignition. That means the iron is reduced in chemical terms, which means there was a thermite reaction. I know of no other way to reduce the iron and produce these spheres from this material as we have observed and published in a peer-reviewed paper. This is our paper. Dr. Niels Herret is first author, and he's doing a wonderful job of spreading the information about this science. This is a peer-reviewed paper in an established scientific journal. I want to emphasize that this paper has not yet been challenged in the literature, the peer-reviewed literature. In the protocol of science, the established protocol, we have published our findings. It took months to get this through peer review, I might say, but it has been published. And as David Griffin pointed out, it's receiving a great deal of attention in Europe. We're hoping, beginning with this conference, we'll get some attention in the media in the United States. Thank you.
Now, all of this evidence together points toward explosive destruction. Now, interestingly enough, fire can't account for any one of these 10 key characteristics, let alone all 10 of them. Not only that, we have FEMA documenting in the Appendix C of their BPAT report in May of 2002 the melting of steel. Again, fires can't melt steel, turning a solid girder into Swiss cheese, like this piece here. Interestingly enough, this is only one of 2 pieces of steel that were saved from the 40,000 tons of steel in World Trade Center 7. It was all, the rest of it was removed illegally the destruction of evidence before the report came out saying, hey, we don't know how this building came down. Our best hypothesis, fire, has only a low probability of occurrence. Let's look at the steel and see what happened. But it was all shipped to China by that time. Expert corroboration? Well, here's one of many. Danny Juwenko, top European controlled demolitions expert, 27 years. He says it starts from below. They've simply blown away the columns. It's a controlled demolition. A team of experts did this. It's professional work, without a doubt. Do we have foreknowledge of the destruction? Plenty, and you'll see it in your DVD, but here's a sneak preview. Listen to these mysterious construction workers.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Move it back.
All right, guys.
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up. Flame, debris coming down.
Flame and debris coming down. The building's about to blow up. How do they know that these 8 to 10 small fires are about to blow up the building? What's going on here? All of this direct evidence, along with data from the FEMA reports, whistleblowers, which you'll hear about in the DVD, the expert corroboration, foreknowledge of destruction, this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt of explosive controlled demolition. I'm going to show you now the problems associated with the Twin Towers, because as clear as that evidence is for World Trade Center Building 7, the Twin Towers have even a far greater clarity in the evidence associated. Beginning with, is there a sudden onset of destruction, not at the base, but at the point of jet plane impacts? After all, let's realize now we're looking at deceptive controlled demolitions. We want to blame the collapse of this building on the fires and the planes. We're going to start these explosions, in this case, at the point of jet plane impacts. Whereupon we hear, and we will hear several examples, dozens and dozens and dozens in the DVD, of sounds and flashes of explosions heard and seen by witnesses, like these, 100 of them, recorded in October after 9/11, but we didn't know about this until August of 2005. Why? The city was holding this information. Finally, the New York Court State of Appeals required them to turn it over to the New York Times. What are these guys saying? 100 of them. Over 100. It actually shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking, heard a terrible noise, and then debris just started flying everywhere. Somewhere around the middle of the World Trade Center, there was this orange and red flash coming out. Initially, just one flash, and then it kept popping all the way around the building, and the building had started to explode. Well, let's see what they might be talking about as we see a known controlled demolition on the left and the North Tower on the right. Is there any similarity in the upper part of the North Tower to a known controlled demolition? Enough to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives, perhaps. That's when I saw the building coming down. Pop, pop, pop. I heard that frigging noise. I saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. You actually heard the pops. You heard the pops of the building. Each popping sound, initially an orange, and then a red flash came out of the building. And then it would go around the building on all four sides. Let's look at the South Tower, see if there's any similarity to a known controlled demolition occurring on the left, where the demolition sequence is occurring in the middle of the building. They don't always have to start at the bottom. I saw a flash, flash, flash. Then it looked like the building came down. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was. A crackling explosive. Let's listen to these gentlemen.
We started running floor by floor instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
If they were
detonated,
planned
yeah.
to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down.